Hello, I'm Scot, Conway, Ph.D., J.D., 8th degree black belt. I am the instructor of Language of Emotions 101A and 101B. I'm also the author of Emotional IQ. My job, as I see it, is to help you become an emotional genius. If I can get you better than 49 out of 50 people using the Mensa standard, I consider you a genius, and I trust that you will too. We've been talking about the language of emotions. We talked about instant state change, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about talking, specifically talking about your emotions, how you talk about your feelings, and how to have these discussions without talking about your feelings. One of the things I do is I'm a counselor, and from time to time I get a married couple comes into me for some coaching, and one of the things that they want to know from the female side very often is, how do I get him to talk about his feelings? Men, on the other hand, seem to not want to talk about their feelings. When I have private conversations, a lot of it is that they don't know how to talk about their feelings. Now, this to me seems more like it's an 80-20 rule sort of thing. It doesn't apply across the board. I find about 1 out of 5 men are very good at talking about their feelings, and about 1 out of 5 women really honestly don't much care about having him talk about his feelings. But we're just going to kind of go with it as though it's true. Also, in a business context, feelings can be relevant because it can include some very important information. But really talking about your emotions, talking about how you feel, doesn't really seem very professional, doesn't seem very businesslike. But if you understand the language of emotions, you know that there could be some key information in there that you might be missing out on. Usually when emotions get involved in business, it's very often in the form of a client complaint. Someone's frustrated with something, that some project's not working and people are getting a little bit despondent. That there could be some fear in business, fear of taking certain action, fear of what's going to happen next, what's going on in the economy. But people don't like, generally, to talk about their emotions in a business environment. So we're going to discuss how you do that as well. The key here is the language of emotions. You understand that emotions mean things. Now, for purposes of these videos, we've only been using 4 big ones. We've been using anger, fear, hopelessness, and guilt. Anger means a broken rule. And the self-protection reaction, the overreaction designed to protect yourself to anger, is to impose rule by force. Fear means something's coming, I'm not ready. So that emotion is telling you, you perceive there's something coming, and you perceive that you're not ready for what you feel is or may be coming. The self-protection reaction there is to hide or to avoid something. When you're dealing with hopelessness. Now, hopelessness is a very narrow emotion. It actually means a very narrow thing. It's exactly what I'm doing, exactly the way I'm doing it, will never produce the result that I desire. Guilt is I violate one of my own highest standards. It's a violation of one's own principles at a level that makes you question your own identity. That if I'm a good man, good men don't do stuff like this. Oh, just what's wrong with me? And that sort of emotional feeling is where guilt comes from. The self-protection reaction there is to self-punish, to make yourself feel bad, to punish yourself for doing that bad thing. And the fact you're doing it to yourself protects your sense of identity and tries to guard you against doing that same thing again. When you know how to understand these emotions, that you can perceive what they are, you can get into them and understand what they mean, then you can kind of manage your action and manage the emotion because you're getting the message now. And when you're getting the message, you no longer need the pain. And then to be able to use the emotion, use that insight that you gain from it to take appropriate action, to take powerful action, to do the things that need doing, to make the changes that need to be made. These negative emotions in general are called emotions of change. All negative emotions, all painful emotions mean something must change. So we're looking at what needs to change. When you're having discussion about emotions, and we're still going to stick with the same 4 emotions of change. I know when people want to talk about their emotions, very often it's about the emotions of duplication. We're going to kind of keep going with the same 4 emotions of change, so that way we can maintain our theme in these videos. Certainly, as you learn more about the language of emotions, you get into it in more depth like we do in Language of Emotions 101A and 101B. That's 24 hours of training in there. So there's a lot of information that I can't get to in just the minutes that I have on these videos. When you're having a discussion about anger, when you're discussing anger, the natural tendency is to be angry when you're discussing anger, or at least to tell someone, sometimes in the converse, like, you made me really angry. In some counseling sessions, they'll even tell people, you take ownership for your feelings. Like, well, when you did that, I felt angry. And it's still talking about anger. Now, people tend to get defensive when they feel someone else is blaming them for their anger. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, or if you've done this, or people have done this to you when you're trying to express your displeasure. Here's a way to talk about anger without talking about anger. We understand that anger means a broken rule. We understand that the self-protection reaction is to impose rule by force. Here's a simple technique to have a discussion about anger without ever even mentioning anger. Just talk about expectations. So you can have the discussion that just says, I have some expectations about how some of these things should go and how they should look like, and they're not going that way. They don't quite look the way I think that they should look. Now I was wondering if you have an opinion about how you think that they should look, or if you might be just interested in my opinion, and we can discuss that. Because I would like this to look differently. And if you don't mind, I would like to be able to find out what you think it should look like, and we can discuss it and figure out what we're going to do. Now, something like that is a discussion about anger. You have a rule. You're sharing that, I have some expectations. I have this idea how I think it should look. And it doesn't look that way. And that's expressing the broken rule. I have a rule and an expectation. It doesn't look that way. My expectation is being valid. My rule is being broken. And when you have a discussion, now you're using a particular strategy there called understand, define, be understood. You're trying to understand where the other person is coming from. In general, people don't do things for the specific purpose of ticking you off, not if they want to have a relationship with you. And you try to understand where they're coming from. Very often, they have really no picture in their mind whatsoever. And that will allow you to then share yours without them having a different picture. Sometimes you find out they might even be trying to do something good, or there's something that they just don't realize is important to you. Having a discussion about expectations, a discussion about what you think it ought to look like, what it ought to sound like, what it ought to be like. And then if they agree with you, and that's one of the keys in understand, define, be understood, as you seek that understanding from them, see if they agree with you, and they may or they may not. And if they think it ought to look different, you think it ought to look one way based on your rules, they think it ought to look different based upon their rules, then you can negotiate a resolution. And as your expectations shift, your rules as to how you think things ought to look will shift, because now you have a new agreement. So instead of expecting it to look like this, you expect it to look like that. Why? Because you had a discussion. That's what you agreed to. So that's a discussion on anger. Now imagine, on the other hand, if I'm a boss and you're the employee and say, well, I'm angry at you. You're supposed to be here at 9 o'clock and you're not here. You do that one more time and you're fired. Well, imagine how people feel about that, how defensive they're likely to get. And if this is a professional person and you want them working, imagine how they might react to that. Well, gee, I'm a lawyer. I mean, why do I have to punch a time clock? I don't have to put up with this. There's plenty of other law firms and it can turn into a fight. At the very least, it can affect their impact their attitude at work and impact their attitude with your clients. So when you're dealing with someone in an effective way, you get their agreement. And people are much more likely to do something that they agree to than something that is imposed upon them. The exact same discussion is, excuse me, I'd like to talk to you. I know we're both professionals and I have some expectations of how I think things should look as far as everyone being here on time. And I was wondering if you have different expectations. And he says, well, I figured, so long as my work gets done, it doesn't really matter. And I said, well, I can understand that perspective, that from your point of view, so long as you get your work done, it doesn't really matter whether you're here at 9 o'clock or 9:15 or 9:30. Do I understand that correctly? And, of course, it was, well, yeah. I said, well, my expectation is for you to be here right at 9 o'clock. Because part of it is that the staff members kind of look to us lawyers as the example. And if the lawyers aren't showing up at 9 o'clock, then some of the paralegals feel like, well, they don't have to be here at 9 o'clock. And some of the clerks feel like, well, they don't need to be here at 9 o'clock. And we're trying to set an example, that we're trying to be the example to create what we hope will duplicate down through the line, down to our lowest employees. Does that make sense to you? And it will or it won't. They may have an excuse like, well, my kid has to be dropped off at school just before 9 o'clock. My child's not even allowed on school campus until 8:30. If I drop them off at 8:30, by the time I'm done with traffic, it's 9:15 or 9:20. If there's a snarl somewhere, I could be here at 9:30. So, there's really not a lot I can do about it with with the situation with my kid. Well, that might create some understanding. Like, oh, okay, well, what am I going to do? Have you abandon your kid? No, probably not. It's okay. Well, for you, instead of having 9 o'clock be your start time, how about we will make your start time 9:30, and we'll make your end time, instead of where everyone else gets off at 5, that you'll actually officially get off at 5:30. So that way the staff knows you're not just kind of blowing in late and then staying late, that's your actual schedule. Will that work for you? And you can develop a solution. And see how the discussion is actually about anger. Because what are we talking about? There's a rule, the rule got broken. You're expressing what your rule is. You're finding out, was it really broken? In this case, yes, it was really broken. You find out why it was broken, realize, well, there's not really a solution there. Well, what's my agenda? My agenda is that an example gets set for the rest of the staff. So we can develop a solution that accomplishes both of the goals. And that's a really, really quick version of having a discussion about anger. Now, in similar vein, you can have a discussion about fear. Fear is something's coming, I'm not ready. Self-protection reaction is to hide. How do you have a discussion about fear, especially with people who don't even want to admit that they're afraid? We have all kinds of code words about fear. Someone might just say something like, well, I have some concerns. Someone else might say something like, well, I'm just kind of stressed about this. And all these different code words that basically mean, I'm scared. Something's coming, I'm not ready. There's too much going on here. I don't know how we're going to do it. I think we're facing failure here. All those things that are code words to cover for fear. Well, how do you have this discussion? Well, you just have the discussion about, well, we're looking at a lot of situations here, and there are things going on. And I was wondering what you think is coming. I mean, what does our future hold? What are we looking at as far as events coming to us? So what are you doing there? You're exploring these something's coming. What do you think is coming? The next part is, and I suppose then the next question obviously is, are we ready for this? So what does ready look like? And are we ready? What do you think ready looks like? So if someone else were ready, what would that look like? And you can have that discussion. And then talk about, and so where are we right now? What do we need to build in to make sure that that's where we are, that we are at that ready position, or maybe even we're more than ready. And we're just ready for that to happen. And if it doesn't even happen that way, it's even worse. We're ready for that too. What do you think? And you can have that discussion. And what you're talking about is fear. Something's coming, I'm not ready. What do you think is coming? What does ready look like, and how do we make sure that's us? You find it's like, it's not us. Like, well, what other resources do we need? Do we need more time? Is there a way we can buy some time? Is there something else we need resource-wise? Do we need more information? Do we need to have more staff? Do we need to have more time? Maybe, if you're talking about a more personal relationship. What's going on in our life? What do we need to know? What do we need to learn? Do we need some help? Do we need some coaching? And then figure out what it takes to get ready. Hopelessness. You can have a discussion about hopelessness. Now, hopelessness is important to catch because when hopelessness gets too big, it turns into depression. So hopelessness, very narrowly, is exactly what I'm doing, exactly the way I'm doing it. Will never produce the outcome I desire. Find out, well, what's the outcome? What do we want this to look like? At a minimum, at an optimum, okay, what are we looking at for outcomes? What's the result we're after? What's our actual goal here? And then you can look at it, and so what are we trying to do to create that? And then do we need to tweak what we're doing in any way, shape, or form? Can we do this a little differently? Now, you can even have this on very vague sort of relational things. It's like, well, where do you see this going? And the answer might be, well, I don't really know. It's like, well, I kind of have a few ideas where I would like it to go if you don't mind me sharing. And when someone gives you permission to share, usually it's very easy to share. So now, I'm wondering if there's anything I can do to get there. And someone might just say, well, I don't really know. I guess I never really thought about it. So, well, that's fair. So how about we set a time, to talk about it again, and make that appointment. Set up that specific time. Because when we're talking about something as vague as relationships, someone might want some time. So, I would like things to move forward, at a comfortable pace. I mean, I know that at any given point in time, there's at least two relationships going on. There's the way I see it, and there's the way you see it. There's what you're getting, there's what I'm getting. One of us might be happier than the other at any particular moment in time. One of us might be more willing to move forward in the relationship at any particular point in time. And I understand that. That makes perfect sense. So we can have a discussion about what can I do to be better for you. And you can even do this in a business relationship. As an employee, what can I do to be a better employee for you? I'm interested in advancement. I'm interested in, getting more money, doing a better job for you, being worth that money. Is there something that I can do to be worth more money to you? So as I demonstrate I'm worth more, that I might be able to get paid more. Rather than just being frustrated and feeling hopeless that exactly what I'm doing, my job, the way I'm doing it, exactly how they're telling me to do it, will never produce the outcome I desire. I want more money than this. I want to make at least this amount of money, and it's not happening. They're not offering any raises, and just everyone I talked to who's gone and asked for a raise has been told no. And we'll try a different strategy. Rather than just let that hopelessness go, you can talk about hopelessness without talking about hopelessness. That exactly what you're doing, exactly the way you're doing it, isn't producing the outcome you desire. Let the boss know what's your outcome. So, I would like to make an extra couple of dollars an hour. I mean, not a lot of extra money, but a couple of dollars an hour would be great. And I'm wondering what I can do to demonstrate that I'm worth that extra money to you. So what are you doing? You're asking for my outcome, exactly what I'm doing, exactly the way I'm doing it. What can I do? How can I do it? You're trying to get more information on formulating a plan to get to where you're trying to get, rather than just letting that feeling of hopelessness make you come into work every day and really not care about whether you're there because you can't get to where you want to go. Guilt. You can have a discussion about guilt. You can have a discussion about even someone not feeling guilty when you think that they should. Guilt means I've violated one of my own highest standards. It's a violated principle at a level that challenges someone's identity. Now, you might be looking at someone, you could have this conversation with your kid, for instance, where your child may have done something. You think they should feel guilty. They don't seem to care. You think that their behavior should not be something they just accept as a normal part of their identity. And you want to have this discussion. You don't go, well, don't you feel guilty? I mean, you should at least feel guilty. And they may not feel guilty. So you may have a very different conversation with them. And you ask, I've noticed that there's some behavior that you've engaged in, and there's some things that you're doing. And as you've been doing it, I expect that you should feel bad about this. And I'm kind of wondering what your perspective is on it. That there's things that you're doing and there's ways that you're doing it, and it doesn't match up with at least who I think you are. And so what this will do is let you have a conversation about guilt, but without actually talking about guilt, without making them feel like they ought to be guilty. And when you're having discussions about things, rather than send someone on a guilt trip, and as soon as you bring up the subject of guilt, that's what a lot of people think, is ask them what their standards are. Ask them how they see themselves. And that's a way to have the discussion without talking about the individual feeling. So that's a few examples, and they're very quick, and I understand I didn't go into them in a lot of detail or with a lot of coaching. But what you can see is that using the language of emotions, it gives you the opportunity to talk about feelings without talking about feelings. It lets you take the definition of the feelings and have a discussion piece by piece about what the emotions mean without having to talk about the emotions themselves. And this will let you have these discussions, so whether you're the one that doesn't want to talk about your feelings, you can talk about the individual pieces of the meaning instead of the feeling itself. If you're trying to have a discussion with someone who doesn't want to talk about their feelings, you can have the discussion, again, using the definition, using the pieces of what the feeling means, so you don't have to talk about the feeling itself. And very often what you'll be able to do is just have an incredibly informative discussion with someone and be able to get a lot of the information that's what you really want to know, and be able to have the discussion without them even realizing sometimes you are talking about feelings. So regardless of which side of that equation you're on, you're the one that doesn't want to talk about your feelings, or you're the one that does. This is a way to have the discussion without having to talk about what people don't want to talk about. I'm Scot, Conway, Ph.D., J.D., 8th degree black belt. This has been a quick instructional video on the language of emotions. Check out Language of Emotions 101A and 101B and my book, Emotional IQ. And we will see you in the next video. Thank you.